2:20 a.m., April 15th, 1912. Ghostly lifebelts drift in the icy Atlantic. Among them, a teenage gaucho, a Mexican statesman, a stewardess who'd survived 3 shipwrecks. Their Latin American voices were lost until tonight. Crack open Latin America's boldest secrets, fact-checked, footnoted, and irresistible. I'm Arturo, and this is LatinLora, Crónicas y Curiosidades, from Amazonian cities unveiled by lidar mist to momias de los Andes, the Andean mummies, whispering royal intrigue. Every tale is triple verified in archives before it reaches your headphones. Hit subscribe. Latin America's Titanic passengers are finally being heard. 2:20 a.m., April 15th, 1912. In the black water of the North Atlantic, the bodies barely moved. Their limbs had gone rigid in the -1 degree Celsius current, floating like a flock of seagulls in the fog, their white lifebelts faintly glowing under the arc lights of the Mackay Bennett. That tableau, rows of the dead, gently drifting, would later be called a study in bodily circulation and valuation by sociologist Jessop. Of the 2,207 passengers and crew aboard RMS Titanic, 1,501 perished. For economists like Frey, Savage, and Torgler, it was a brutal, if unintentional, experiment in who lives and who dies when time runs out and choices must be made. But one corner of the story, Latin America's presence aboard that doomed ship, has remained all but silent. Hidden beneath the creaking hull and iconic myths is a shoreline of forgotten voices, still surfacing. A global cataclysm and a cartography of omission. Peruvian historian Jaime David Menacho Carhuamaca notes that newspapers across South America ran front-page coverage of the Titanic for weeks. Cablegrams flowed, but foreign correspondents rarely got the names right. Spanish surnames were misspelled, passengers lumped into generic categories like foreign, and no one fought to interview grieving families from Montevideo, Buenos Aires, or Mexico City. What followed was what Menacho calls an archival cartography of omission. To this day, passenger lists still erase national identities under catch-alls. Museums spotlight the wealthy and the Anglo. Latin American stories, when they appear, do so by accident, or thanks to the tireless digging of historians unwilling to let them vanish. 12 ticket, 1 continent. Menacho's archival work has identified at least a dozen Titanic passengers with routes stretching from Rio Cuarto, Argentina, to Montevideo, Uruguay, to Chihuahua, Mexico. These weren't anonymous steerage immigrants. They were surveyors, students, wine merchants, people moving between South American boomtowns and European capitals. To them, the Titanic wasn't the end of an era. It was a fast track to something new. Ivy League classrooms, transatlantic investments, for some, even escape from revolution. They boarded with bilingual dreams and died bilingual deaths. Edgar Samuel Andrew, a suitcase on the seabed. At just 16 years old, Edgar Samuel Andrew had left Cordoba province for agricultural training in England. He wrote home that he felt no pride at boarding the largest ship in the world. "I almost wish the Titanic lay at the bottom already." His words now feel tragically clairvoyant. In 2001, divers recovered a leather suitcase from the wreck. Inside were his farm ledgers, an inkwell, a pair of gaucho slippers. His entire identity, Argentine and English, Old World and New, preserved in salt water. Sociologist Jessop argues that what gets saved from a shipwreck isn't random. First-class artifacts, like Andrew's, are curated and displayed. Third-class belongings, often jettisoned as debris. Violet Jessop, Argentina's daughter in Lifeboat 16. Born in Bahía Blanca, Violet Constance Jessop defied fate not once, but 3 times. She survived the Olympics collision, the Titanic sinking, and the Britannic's explosion during wartime duty in 1916. Her memoir, later edited by maritime historian John Maxstone Graham, is one of the few female perspectives on maritime labor taught in history classrooms today. On Titanic, she was ordered to serve as a calming presence for non-English speaking passengers, then tossed into lifeboat 16 with someone else's baby in her arms. Her survival complicates the clean stats we see in studies. She was a woman, a Latin American, a steward, and a miracle. Don Manuel Ramirez Uruchurtu, the gentleman's seat Manuel Uruchurtu, a Mexican federal deputy, boarded Titanic in Cherbourg after settling post-revolution land disputes in France. During the final evacuation, he allegedly surrendered his lifeboat seat to a French Basque woman. That act became lore in Mexico, a Porfirian elite recast as a Republican martyr. Frey and his fellow economists may classify traveling in company or high status as predictors of survival. But in this case, status compelled sacrifice. Ramón Artagaveytia, twice shipwrecked, once remembered. Uruguayan rancher Ramón Artagaveytia had already survived the fiery wreck of the steamer America in 1871. He boarded Titanic at age 71, perhaps believing lightning wouldn't strike twice. A 2019 Uruguayan study calls his story a national parable. Quote, "One who survives one shipwreck, but not two. His grave in Montevideo remains a quiet shrine to the risks of global travel and the ghosts of unfinished journeys." The Carrau family, champagne and cold silence. Francisco Carrau and his teenage nephew, Jose Pedro, boarded Titanic en route to expand their Uruguayan Spanish wine empire. Neither survived. No bodies were found. No belongings recovered. Historian Jordi Casanovas, Berdaguer, describes their disappearance as an economic shipwreck within the maritime one. And Beer adds, "What we can study depends on what the sea decides to return: class, corpses, and the politics of memory." 1/3 of the recovered bodies were buried at sea. Most were crew or steerage passengers. First-class bodies, nearly all embalmed and shipped home. That quiet sorting reshaped the way the Titanic would be remembered. Families with coffins commissioned biographies. Those who received only a telegram disappeared from the record. Latin American passengers, often outside the British class system, were among the first to be erased from history, both physically and academically. A fuller map of the Atlantic. These Latin American souls weren't side stories. For LatinLora, they were the story. Edgar Andrews' ledgers show that the Argentine pampas were exporting more than beef. They were sending ideas. Violet Jessop's calm reminds us who held the ship together, unseen. Uruchurtu's last seat gives new shape to what we call honor. The Carrau losses hint at how fragile family empires really were. Together, they redraw the Atlantic, not just as a shipping lane, but as a network of lives, letters, and losses that connected the Americas to Europe, long before jet engines or global news cycles. As maritime historians digitize old manifests and curators decide whose shoes go in glass cases, these Latin American voices are finally surfacing, not as a side note, but as ballast. Without them, the full weight of Titanic's story never quite sits right. Gracias, curiosos de la historia. Thanks for trekking the hidden trails of Latin America with me. If you uncovered a new clue today, like, share, and hit subscribe so you never miss the next mystery. Drop your theories below, and until then, keep the legends alive and the facts on fire. Nos vemos en la próxima crónica.